This episode is brought to you by John Blake Sales Breakthrough Solutions, helping you to at least double the amount of leads that you get that convert into paying clients.
Welcome to the Master Dealmaker's Secrets podcast. And now, here's sales growth strategist, John Blake.
Welcome to Master Dealmaker's Secrets. I'm John Blake. This is episode 156, and today I am pretty pumped because we are going to be talking to Kevin Thompson, and we're going to be talking about $1 million relationships, which I am sure you are going to get a stack out of. I really did break it down with him and extracted. He's been doing this for a long time, and he has created an incredible amount of goodwill and some incredible wealth out of simply $1 million relationships. Putting amazing people together, and it was awesome to learn some of the stuff that we learned from Kevin. So I'm sure you're going to get a stack out of this episode. But before we get into that, what I want you to do is head over to johnblakeaudio.com. What I've got over there is perfect. If you've got clients that you or prospects that you've spoken to, that you've made an offer to, but they haven't converted yet, I have got the perfect solution for you over at johnblakeaudio.com. What you will get is a 15-minute audio that shows you exactly how to convert those clients, those prospects that you've spoken to, into paying clients over a 90-day period. So exactly what to say in terms of re-engaging them in the conversation with you, exactly when to email, exactly what to write in your email. You'll get all of my word-for-word scripts, all of my word-for-word email templates. There's a 15-minute audio that walks you through exactly how to do it. And then there's also a PDF guide that has got, as I said, the exact word-for-word scripts that you need to use, exactly when to email, exactly when to call. One of the biggest questions I get is how much is too much in terms of when I'm following up. This will map it out for you perfectly over a 90-day period, and you will make sales. You will make sales that you would not have already made, you wouldn't normally have made, if you hadn't followed them up, or if you'd followed them up in the normal way that you follow them up. So it's at johnblakeaudio.com. Go over, grab it, watch it, get into it, use it, and let me know how you go. I'm really excited for you because I'm sure you're going to make some sales out of this. Okay, so I have Kevin Thompson with me here tonight, and we are going to be talking about $1 million relationships. I've known Kevin for many years. I was recently on Kevin's podcast, which we had a really good conversation, and so I have invited Kevin to come on to Master Dealmaker Secrets because obviously $1 million relationships is a crucial part of putting deals together. Kevin is an absolute master at this. He's been doing it for a long time. I'll get Kevin to expand a little bit more on his background in a sec, but I'm really looking forward to this evening's conversation because there's so much emphasis that's placed on putting content out there and lead generation and cost per lead and digital advertising. And I think, lead generation has become, it's become commoditized. It's become very churn and burn. And what Kevin talks about is developing relationships that transcend, this typical idea of lead generation, very significantly. And it's a very different mindset to this sort of commoditized churn and burn idea of lead gen and how to put deals together. So, Kevin, mate, firstly, welcome. It's a pleasure to be chatting to you again.
You too, John.
And perhaps before we sort of go too much further, I might just get you to just expand a little bit on your background. You've done a lot of things. You've been in this space for a long time. So it'd be great to sort of just get a bit more of a background on you before we sort of get stuck into tonight's discussion.
Sure. Prior to doing what I do now is, which I host a couple groups, one called Tribe for Leaders, which is for a group of entrepreneurs, which is the sole purpose of these groups is to help facilitate meaningful connections for the members that will help them grow their businesses, add revenue. But the big thing and the big overarching thing is make a bigger impact in this world. That's the motivation for all of them. And they all understand that the revenue and the income is a byproduct of that.
Yeah.
And so, but I, where I really came to understand the power of relationships was in a previous business I used to own for 12 years. I used to have a training company, and I grew that business solely through strategic partnerships, meaning that I partnered with other businesses that they helped me get my message out into the marketplace. And in exchange for their help, I compensated them a percentage of the revenue that we created. And over a 12-year period, I did almost 600 strategic partnerships, and we did $16.1 million in sales of the training that I created solely through strategic partnerships. And so that's kind of how this whole thing came to be for myself, really understanding the value, the importance of relationships. And I will tell you, John, and I know you and I were talking about this before we started the recording, in this day and age where we're at right now, relationships have always been our most valuable asset, but now that is more true than ever. And so this is a very timely topic right now.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I wholeheartedly agree with you. So the interesting thing about relationships is that they tend to, there's a pattern in terms of how they start. And I would imagine that you would have noticed some common denominators that underpin the best relationships. Can you expand a little bit about how you have noticed the most longest standing, the most beneficial, and the most fulfilling and enjoyable relationships start and continue? What are the common denominators?
Yeah. So, I'm just chuckling because yesterday, I started my podcast, the $1 Million Relationships podcast. I started like 7 months ago. And so I'm relatively new to the podcast world. And just 2 days ago, I got an email from somebody, wanting to offer me their services, but they started off that email by saying, I found you in a podcast directory. Yeah. And I'm like, no, you didn't. And not, and like, I got a chuckle. I just ignored the email, but I'm thinking, that kind of thing is not uncommon. People reaching out, cold or what have you, with whatever messaging that is just simply not true. Yeah. And I'm going to tell you, that is not a good way to kick off any relationship.
No. Yeah. I stumbled. There's a guy that I follow on LinkedIn. I can't recall his name, but when so I stumbled upon your profile, and this guy, he's an English fellow, and he said, so what, were you LinkedIn drunk?
Nice. Yes. Yeah. And unfortunately, I don't know, there's a lot of people teaching this. There's a lot of people doing it, and that's great, whatever. But if we're looking at long-term, meaningful, real relationships that are ultimately going to be profitable as well, we want them to start off on the right foot. Yep. And we don't want to start off on the foot of being dishonest or deceitful or just even little white lies. So it doesn't matter. I'll tell you. So I'll give you another example. I recently put up a Facebook post because I reread the book The Go-Giver by Bob Burke.
Got it.
And
I've read that one.
Book, great book.
Yeah, it's a ripper.
And I've read that book, 8 or 9 times over the last 12 years. And I reread it just recently. And I had put up a Facebook post talking about that because, because we're always growing as individuals. When we read a book before, we read it again and we're like, wow, I didn't pick up this or this or this.
Yeah.
And that's because we've grown, that's why. And that was certainly the case this time. Well, a friend of mine ended up commenting on that post and he tagged Bob Berg in it.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, well, that's cool. And so then I sent Bob a friend request. And then some other people were chiming in about, man, that is an awesome book. I refer it to people all the time and this and that. And so Bob was interacting with all this. And I was like, I'm going to see if Bob wants to be on the podcast. And so I just sent him a message on Facebook and I said, hey, man, it's really cool seeing you jump in and seeing everybody talking about the impact that your book has had on their lives, and mine included. And I host this podcast, and I'll tell you, I have been, your book has had such an impact on my life over the last decade plus. I would love to interview you on the podcast.
And did he come on?
He did come on, and
Awesome.
we did that interview.
Awesome.
And see that there's a huge lesson there, John, because the way that I have always started any relationship is with active appreciation, by letting somebody know that I appreciate them, just being genuine, that, just telling Bob, hey, I first read your book 12 years ago and it has had such an impact on my life. Well, you know what? That's 100% true.
Yeah.
And it makes Bob feel good. He's like, who wouldn't want to hear that,
Yeah.
And that's a much, much better way to start a relationship. It's just, and I'll let you know that no matter how successful somebody is, no matter how big a business that they run, there is not a person on the face of this earth who gets too much genuine appreciation.
Yeah,
we
that's
all
so true.
crave more of that.
Yeah, that's
and
so
that's
true.
a heck of a way to start a relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you really do genuinely admire or I think sincerity and being congruent and genuine about the thing that you're appreciating, if there really is a genuine respect and a genuine admiration of that particular thing that you're referring to, then you're aligned right from the get-go, because you're actually talking about something that you have a mutual interest in. So, if we think about our longest standing relationships, they're the people that we have the most in common with, that we are on the same wavelength about and with. So,
Yes.
so how, what better foundation to have to begin a profitable relationship, or even just a relationship that perhaps starts without the, without what they call the in order to, it just starts because it starts. Because there's,
and
there's
the reality, if you
ground,
think about it, any relationship, John, if there is not that mutual respect and appreciation for each other, how long is it going to last? Because if that's not there, the relationship just kind of starts dying,
Yeah.
and it dwindles down. But as long as there is that mutual respect and admiration for each other, we might go times where there might be months and even years in between communications, but because another example, last Christmas, during the Christmas season, one of my old Army buddies I got reconnected with on Facebook and stuff.
Yep.
And I was in the Army from 1983 to 1987. This was like a part of my way back past, over 30 years ago.
Wow.
And I had not talked to this guy since then. Well, we got on the phone and we caught up, and it was like we picked up right where we left off.
Yep.
And we were like talking about old stories and experiences that we had and catching up. And then he tells me, he's like, I'm connected with a bunch of other guys from our unit and stuff back then.
Yep.
We get on a Zoom call every quarter. If you want to join us, you can do that. And I did that over the holidays, in between Christmas and New Year's. I hopped on a Zoom call with like 7 of these guys.
Yep.
These were all guys that I knew, but I had not spoken with in like 30 plus years.
Oh, wow. Wow.
We just picked up right where we left off because of that mutual admiration and respect for each other that we had.
Yep.
And so even though in that instance, those relationships, there was that huge time span in between.
Yep.
They were still intact,
Yeah. Yeah, that's so cool. So mutual respect, active appreciation. What are some of the other common denominators? Because obviously, you've had some that have been, immensely profitable, but you've had some very long ones. What would you say are the other common denominators?
Well, I'll tell you, when it comes to business, having profitable relationships is definitely a cool thing too,
Yep.
And so,
Yep.
and so what a relationship that I had years ago is what kind of really set me off on this journey. This friend of mine, Brian, at the time, and this would have probably been 12, 13 years ago.
Yep.
He worked at this company called Boardroom, which they were a big, huge direct mail company. They mailed millions of pieces of direct mail every year, and they sold products that way. And they were trying to figure out the Google AdWords platform, though.
Right.
And they were really having challenges with it. And he was telling me, he's like, man, Kevin, this isn't our thing at all. We don't even really know what we're doing, but we're trying to figure it out. And I was like, do you know of Perry Marshall? And he's like, well, I know of him. I was like, well, Perry and his team, they could totally help you with that.
Yep.
And he's like, do you know Perry? And I'm like, yeah. I was like, I'll get you guys connected. So I ended up sending an email, get those two connected. Perry and his team did help out the folks in the Boardroom, but beyond that, Brian and Perry just became really great friends.
Got it.
And about a year later, they hosted this event called the Titans of Direct Response in Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
And the opening day of that event, I'm getting all these messages, text messages and Facebook messages on my phone from people saying, hey, these guys are talking about you from stage here in a really good light because you're the one who introduced them and stuff. And they're saying, hey, this would have never happened without Kevin connecting us. And my friend Paul texted me, he's like, Kevin, he's like, he's telling me what's going on. He's like, one never knows where a well-planted seed will sprout.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, man, that is really cool. And that motivated me because now I'm starting to thinking, you know what, man, wouldn't it be cool if I had a business where that was my thing?
Yeah.
That's what I did. So I started asking myself that question. I had conversations with Perry. I started having conversations with Brian. I had conversations with all kinds of people to just start like feeling this out. And now fast forward today, here it is. That's exactly what I do.
Yeah.
And I have made, and it's not just being a connector for people. It's I have so much respect and admiration for the people that I get to serve. And they are already making such a big impact in this world through their business that if I can help them make an even bigger impact, that's what motivates me. That's what I love doing. And anybody can, you don't need to own a business that's your focus. That was something that was like really motivating to me. But anybody can do this. And I know lots of friends who are connectors for people and have facilitated connections, relationships for people in their life that they care about that have led to businesses growing, revenue being produced. And I just have it set up where when it's a win for somebody else, I get to share in a little bit of that. And I just kind of figure out how we can best do that, So.
Got it. So do you do you like, do you sometimes take a percentage of that? Do you always take a percentage of that? Do you sometimes not? Do you more than you don't do? Like how does that part work?
Yeah. So it used to be that I never did that because I was like, what would people think if I said, okay, I'm going to connect you guys, but if you guys do something together, I want to share. I want and I'm just like, that didn't sit with me,
Didn't feel that good, right? Yeah.
And so
I think a lot of people feel like that, like they could be putting something together that, that could be the catalyst to create something huge, but there's an awkwardness and maybe, that might be that might seem a bit contrived, maybe that takes away from some of the goodwill that I might be creating, that, it's a detractor kind of thing. Yeah.
And that was,
how do you deal with that?
That was certainly the stuff that was going through my mind, because I really am. I mean, I've always been about the relationships and these people in my life. I've known them for a long time, and so all of that stuff was going through my mind, and I was actually having that conversation with a friend of mine back in 2019, and he's like, Kevin, he said, let me ask you this. He's like, what if you just phrased it with people like this instead? He's like, what if you said, that thing that you're telling me about, I might know somebody who can help you with that. Whether it's helping them solve a problem, whether it's helping them take advantage of an opportunity that they have that they need help with, or what have you. And if I were to connect you with that person and it actually led to revenue being created, would you be open to sharing some kind of a percentage of that with me? And as soon as he said that, he's like, Kevin, how does that sit with you? And I'm like, wow, yeah, I can do that. I can totally do that. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to test this and I'll see what happens and stuff. And so I just started having that conversation with people. And I will tell you, John, that there is not one person who has ever said no when I asked them that question. I'm like, wow, that was really simple. And I learned a huge lesson there too, because most of us entrepreneurs, you know what, this really goes back to that book, The Go-Giver by Bob Burg too. And I would suggest anybody who has not read that book, go get it. It's a quick, easy, short read. It's a story, it's a parable, and it really drives home these points. But when we're really good at giving and helping others and all of that kind of stuff, but most of the time we I certainly did. I totally sucked at receiving, and God forbid asking for what I wanted. And that was a huge breakthrough for me when I realized that, like, wow, how much, not just revenue, but how much joy and satisfaction have you been missing out on, all because you weren't asking for what you wanted and stuff. And
I remember a post that I saw you put on Facebook where you because that wasn't that was quite recent, right? Like the whole asking, getting.
Oh, well, that is something I talk about a lot. Because so many, I will tell you, I work with 7-8 figure entrepreneurs, running companies doing 7-8 figures a year plus. And even though they're, by anybody else's standards, looking in at their company, they're being, wow, they run a very successful business. The founders of those companies, in many cases, they are extremely giving and generous people, but they are not good at receiving either. Now, some of them are, but most of them, the majority of them, are not. In fact, I know one person in particular that he openly shared. His company, I don't know, I know they grew immensely last year, but he openly admits, he's like, man, I have not been good at receiving at all. and when we learn that it's okay to be able to receive, and it's okay to give other people the joy and the satisfaction that comes from giving to us, because we love that feeling. But yet when we don't receive, when we don't ask for what we want, we deprive other people from having that experience that we just love. And so when we open ourselves up to that, it's a big shift. It's a massive shift. And just like happened in my world, that kind of just opened the floodgates. And I'm like, wow, people do want to give to me too. They do want to share. All I had to do was ask.
So when did that shift for you? Was that a recent thing, or is that something that happened a long time ago?
Well, that conversation happened in 2019. So that's been 3 years ago.
Yeah, so it wasn't that long ago, right?
No. So, and the whole giving and receiving thing, I first had a conversation with my friend Jesse Elder around that back in 2002. So it's like 10 years, or excuse me, 2012. So it's been like 10 years on this whole giving and receiving thing. But yet I feel like, in many cases, 10 years later, here I am now, just like really stepping into this, really having, and I've been intentionally focusing on it for a long time.
Yeah. A lot of people who listen to the podcast want to know what we do over at Master Dealmaker Secrets. And effectively what we do is we work with sales professionals and business owners all over the world who are seeing massive increases in their top line sales revenue. So we help business owners and sales professionals to effectively focus on the three key drivers to growing sales revenue in your business. The first one is controlling the message that you send out into the marketplace so that potential clients see and hear and read what you do as an opportunity as opposed to your competitors. The second thing that we do is we help you to create a direct path to the 20% of your ideal clients that will deliver 80% of the revenue. So everyone knows the 80-20 rule. We help you to develop a direct path to the 20% of the people that are going to give you 80% of your sales revenue in your business. And the third thing that we allow you to do, that we create a process for, is for you to be able to double the amount of leads that you get that convert into paying clients. So if this is of interest, we do have an application-only process to become involved in this particular program. And to get to there, all you need to do is to go to www.johnblakescall.com. So it's JOHNBLAKESCALL.com, and there's a couple of questions to answer there. And then what you'll do is get on a quick conversation with me, and I can find out a little bit more about what you've got going on in your business and see potentially whether what you are doing would be a fit for what we could help you with. And at that point, I can extend an invitation if it's a fit, and you can make the choice to come on board or not. So that's the opportunity. That would be the next step if you're looking at how you can take things to the next level. If you're enjoying what you're hearing on the podcast, if you're getting value from it, I invite you to do that, and I will look forward to talking to you. The website is www.johnblakescall.com. Talk to you soon.
And so we've had that incremental improvement, but now we're having that exponential improvement in this whole thing, and just really opening up to receiving from others. So.
Yeah. Wow. That's so cool. Cause it's like that classic thing, even if you boil it down to, if you're having a really bad day, or, if you're feeling down, one of the best things that you can do is to go and cheer somebody else up.
Yeah.
And they often talk about how, that's why many comedians struggle with mental health, is because their version of cheering themselves up is being funny and making other people laugh. Mm-hmm. Because that's the best way to brighten up your own mood, is to help somebody else out and do something for someone else. Yeah. So, there's got to be a parallel there in terms of what we're talking about, for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we've talked about active appreciation in terms of, and mutual respect in terms of starting a $1 million relationship, which is obviously the most fertile foundation that we could put down. And we've talked about introducing people to great people, helping people to further their mission, and having a way that we can actually ask and see if people would be open to sharing a percentage of what might come about in terms of putting great people together. One of the things I was going to ask you is, what happens if you refer somebody to someone and it doesn't work out? Has that ever happened to you?
That has happened to
Yeah.
me, absolutely. And we should probably define doesn't work out, because a lot of times I'll make connections and then nothing substantial comes from it, where they just find like that's it's not a right fit, or they don't do anything together. That happens regularly.
Yeah.
But where you introduce somebody, and let's say the people that you introduce, one party hires the other party, for example, they
Yep.
hire their services.
Yep.
And then later that party doesn't deliver or what have you. And
Yeah.
so I have had that happen for sure. And I'll tell you, the first time that really happened, that weighed on me so heavily. I'm like, man, you really messed up. I carried the burden of that for a good 2.5 months, because I'm like, man, how could I let this happen? You're not a very good judge of character, because you thought you knew this person, and then they didn't, and look what happened. And I just beat myself up big time for that.
Yep.
And but here's the thing. People will be people. And I do my very best to form relationships with people and build trust with them and let them build trust with me and all of that kind of stuff. But what I had to learn, and this came just through talking this out with the people that were involved in it, as well as other people in my life that I really cared about, that people know my intentions. They know that it's not the money. So I'm definitely not like coin operator when it comes to these relationships and making connections. I do not do it because I stand to benefit financially from it. The reason I do it is because I really love and appreciate both parties that I'm connecting, and I want the best for both of them. And that's why I do it. And people know that about me. And so if this does happen on occasion, which it's going to, because people will be people, stuff happens. In this particular instance, the gentleman was having some internal challenges in his company with employee turnover and all that kind of stuff, which was causing the ball to get dropped and delivery not to happen. And so, but even at that, people, when we know what our intention is, other people know what our intentions are as well. And so neither one, this other person didn't lay blame on me because of that, because they were like, Kev, you know what? I know, you were trying to do your best and stuff. And yes, it happened, but I do not hold this on you at all. And so, what we do, and what I will caution people, anybody against, is that, revenue doesn't happen, that's not our motivation for doing this. Revenue is the byproduct of what we do. Revenue is the byproduct of having relationship capital with people, of having trust with people, of being that conduit of trust for them. Revenue and income are the byproduct of doing that.
Yep. I love that. Such an important distinction.
Yeah.
It's the byproduct, not the
not the motivation.
Not the motivator, yeah. I love that because the opposite of being too fearful about, well, what if it doesn't work out, is that you hold back and you resist. And I've felt myself holding back and resisting and thinking, maybe what if it doesn't work out? What if it's, but that's not the right answer either. And I loved what you just said about just knowing your intention and having purity in your intention. Because if you have that, even if it does, in the unlikely event or in the likely event that sometimes it doesn't work out, then your intention was clear and clean, and people will and it won't it'll be less likely to blow back on you. It might blow back on you a little bit, but if people know you and they know your intention and they know what you're trying to achieve and that you had the best in mind for both parties, then that's that's going to shine through, surely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that you're absolutely right. When people know, you at the core of who you are, what your intention is, all of that kind of stuff, I beat myself up far worse
Yeah.
than anybody else did in that situation.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I mean, I must admit, I connected, a number of people, and I have had a couple that have not gone as well as I would have liked them to, given what I had in mind and given what happened. And you do, there's a level of guilt there. You sort of think, oh God, maybe I shouldn't have done that, but no one, and I've always been a lot harder on myself than what anyone else has.
Totally. And John, that's it's cool to hear you voice that, because we get jazzed about stuff. We get this picture in our mind of like, man, this would be so cool if these guys came together on this, and man, and we get these images in our mind of what could happen and stuff. And like I said, people will be people, and sometimes that happens. Here's the deal. In anything that we do, there's three things that can happen. We can get the results we'd hoped for.
Mm-hmm.
We can get less than the results we'd hoped for.
Yeah.
Or we can get better than the results we'd hoped for.
Yeah.
So anything we do, we're going into it with a 66.6% chance that we're going to get the results we'd hoped for or better. That's pretty good odds,
Yeah.
And so let me ask you this though, and this is a lesson that I had to learn. If we connect a couple of people, or if we're working on a project or whatever, so we're collaborating with somebody, and we're going in this, and we're both getting really jazzed about it, like, man, this could happen and this could happen, but in the end, wow, those results that we'd hoped for, we didn't get those results. We didn't get better results than that. In fact, we got actually worse results than what we had hoped for.
Yep.
But through all of that, do you feel that the relationship that you had with whoever you're working with on this project, in the end, is it going to be furthered, or is it going to be damaged because of the experience that you had together? And when you think about it, it's like, you know what? That experience is going to cause the relationship to be furthered regardless of what the results are.
Especially if the relationship sits on that mutual appreciation and mutual respect.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, if it doesn't sit on that foundation, then the relationship might not be furthered. But
oh, totally. So
yeah.
And like, there are a lot of entrepreneurs who are totally motivated by the money,
yep.
by the revenue. I've ran into people like that. And I'm not in alignment with that, because whenever somebody starts a conversation with like, man, if we do this thing, we can make bank, Kev. We could, and I'm like, yeah, but wait a minute, what about all the people who are going to be the beneficiaries of what we do together? What about them? Where's the conversation around them and
yep.
stuff?
Yeah.
And so, but yes, you're right. There are those that are motivated by money, not by relationships. And so, if somebody's motivated by money, you're absolutely right. If they're working on a project and it doesn't produce the revenue that they'd hoped for, well, you're right, because the money was the motivation. Say, that didn't work. That relationship, that's worthless to me because it didn't produce revenue.
Yeah.
Because
that was the most important thing from the get-go. Yeah.
That's right. That's
yeah.
right. And for me personally, I don't have any problem talking about potential revenue being created and all of that kind of stuff, but it needs to be in the right context of serving people and making an impact through doing what we do. You know?
Yeah, it needs to sit in the right place in the hierarchy of the conversation, of the relationship, of the transaction.
Yeah, because here's the deal. I don't care how much revenue I can make from something. If I think for 1 second that it would damage any relationship in my life that I value, I'm out.
Yeah.
Because I don't care about the revenue. The relationship is far more important to me, far more valuable to me than any revenue that could be created.
Yeah, I agree. These are such important distinctions, and I think if you went back and examined, the transactions or the business relationships that went wrong, you could pretty much pick all of the things that we're talking about that would be the cause.
Yeah,
it's quite simple. It's like if you have that shared mission, if you have mutual appreciation, if you have mutual respect, if you're aligned philosophically, all of those things create that foundation. And then if the profit is not the core driver or the core motivator, then the worst that can happen is that it's a learning thing, and you can reload and do better, more informed next time.
That's right. That's
so.
Right.
Yeah, these are.
And I'll tell you, in my experience, especially, the more successful somebody is, the more the message of money or revenue is not appealing to them. Because if I approach somebody in my life who I know is extremely successful and said, John, you and I, we should do this thing together, man, because we would totally crush it. We'd make all this money together. And then you start asking me, well, okay, sounds good, Kevin. How is that going to benefit all my people? How's that going to further the relationship I have with all my people? Oh, it probably won't at all. In fact, but we'll make all this money if we did it, that's not going to be very appealing to you. And I'll tell you that, the more successful somebody is, the larger business that somebody runs, they don't need my help in producing revenue. And in fact, producing revenue is not the thing that is at the top of their mind, because they already know how to do that. They're already doing that.
Yep.
And what is the top of their mind is making a bigger impact. How do I make a bigger impact in this world? And because I know that by making a bigger impact, that leads to more revenue. And so I want to be talking with them, not about how we can make a bunch of money together, but how we can make a bigger impact together. How can we combine our efforts so that together we can make a bigger impact than either one of us could possibly do on our own?
Yeah.
That's the conversation.
When I had a business partner a number of years ago, he was a super creative guy, and he used to come to me with all sorts of different ideas that and in the what it's like in this in the consulting business, there's so many different things that you could potentially be doing. You could watch 4 webinars a day and launch 4 different business models based on or 4 different approaches based on what you might learn in those webinars. And so he would come to me with a bunch of different ideas, and I didn't want to be that guy that was just the negative. You know what I mean? So I came up with a bunch of questions, and the first question was, will it dovetail into what we're already doing?
Yeah.
the second question was, will be fun? Like, will we enjoy it? Will it be fun? And the third question was, will it make us money in the next 30 days? And if the answer, and most times the answer was no to all of those questions. And then the fourth question was, so do you think we should do it? And it was my way of not being negative and not saying no, and being, very, I guess, Socratic.
Yeah.
And
But what a great process for analyzing something.
Yeah. Yeah.
What a great process. And there's I learned, and I know that he didn't come up with it, but that's where I learned it from. This friend of mine, Travis Sago, talks about this thing called timer, and timer stands for time, identity, money, energy, and reputation or relationship.
Yeah.
And those are the 5 core currencies. And at any given time, for most entrepreneurs, there's one of those currencies that are more valuable to them. And usually, especially for established entrepreneurs, money is not the most valuable currency. Time and relationships or reputation are definitely up there. If you can save them time, if you can help them further their relationships or create more valuable relationships, that's far more valuable to them than the currency of money.
Yeah.
Because that leads to more money, more revenue, So, yeah.
Yeah, it's so true. So true. Awesome. Well, look, Kevin, this has, as always, been a extremely enjoyable conversation. Is there anything that you would like to add that you think would be valuable? So, for the people who are listening to this, and they've obviously seen my headline, and we've talked about $1 million relationships. Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you would, having been doing this and continuing to do this for so long, is there anything that you would add to what we've talked about that you think would be valuable, that would add to what we've already talked about so far?
Yeah. So here's when we're in networking situations, John, you and I met in Kevin Nation's family mastermind group. That would be considered a networking situation, and a pretty damn good one at that.
Yeah.
Because of the financial and for you, John, not only the financial investment to be there, but you had a substantial time investment to be there. It wasn't like it was just down the street for you to get there.
It was not around the corner. Yeah, that one took a while.
So so anybody who's in a room like that Kevin Nation's put together is probably going to be pretty good people just because of the vetting process, And so when we find ourselves in rooms like that, where, we're in these settings where it is a networking thing, so many people make the mistake of thinking that it's go time. I got to have as many conversations with as many people as I can, because this is a finite opportunity. It's only for this long, and I just got to make the rounds. And
I got to work this room. I got to talk to as many people as possible.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And we all know that shit don't work, man.
No.
The way that you really work is you don't try to have conversations with everybody in the room and go shallow. And then you get home with a big old stack of business cards and you're like, I don't know who any of these people are. I don't remember any of these people.
Yep.
Because you started no relationship. You had no experience with any of them. You were working the room.
Yeah.
When we have a conversation, so I'll give you an example. I was at an event last July, and I last day in the afternoon, we had a 15-minute break, and I ended up talking with this guy, John. Mm-hmm. And I asked John a question, which led to him talking about this and that and the other thing. And then I was like fascinated by what he was sharing with me. So I was asking him more clarifying questions and all of that. And before you know it, the 15 minutes is up and they're calling us to come back in. And John is like, man, Kev, I am so sorry. I ended up talking the whole dang time and I didn't get to find out anything about you at all. And I'm like, John, it's totally cool, man. It's like we can maybe talk tonight, or if we don't get to talk tonight before the event ends, we can just exchange information and we can catch up later, get on Zoom or a telephone or whatever. And he's like, yeah, he said, I would really like that. Now, here's the thing. When we have a conversation, I mean, we've all been to events where we ran into those people who are working the room. They're the ones that when they're standing there in conversation with you, and you ask them a question, or they'll ask you a question, better yet, and then you start answering them, and then they're just kind of like scanning in the room.
Yeah. Exactly.
Who else is here, man? Who else do I want to talk to? And they are not engaged. And you know what? How does that make somebody feel?
Shit house. Terrible.
And it makes you feel like you're not important at all, that they just asked you this question. They don't give a rip about, but what happens? I mean, for me, I love talking with entrepreneurs. I love hearing what they're up to. I love hearing about the next mountain they're trying to climb. I mean, that is fascinating to me. And so what would happen if you ask somebody a question? Hey, what are you working on right now that most excites you? Well, I got news for you. They're going to start telling you, man. And they're going to get animated about it too. And then when you, God forbid, are actually interested in hearing what they have to say, and not only hearing what they have to say, but as they're sharing with you, you're asked, man, tell me more about that. What was that like? And you being engaged with them, and and don't look at this as a strategy. Don't look, oh, I'm going to work the room that way now. No, BS. Don't look at this as a strategy or a tactic. Just let it be who you are. Just care about other people. And here's the thing that happens when you do that is you give people an amazing gift. You give them the gift of being seen, heard, and understood. And that is something that they hardly ever get to receive. And that feeling, we've heard this thing about, that it's how we make people feel is far more valuable than anything we can possibly say. Well, this whole, like that conversation with John, I barely said a word for the whole 15 minutes. But how he felt at the end of that was of feeling seen, heard, and understood. He was like, damn, I just want to talk with Kevin. And John, you and I, before we started recording, you were saying, hey, Kevin, you know who does my podcast for me? Well, this guy, John, his company now does my podcast for me because of that relationship.
Awesome.
So,
the thing I have probably given myself a hard time because in those networking situations, I intuitively, so academically, it's like, okay, well, you're in a networking situation. So, what's the best thing? What's the rule of the game? What's the outcome? Like you said, hand out as many business cards as you can, collect as many business cards as you can, and then follow up on Monday. Well, I don't do that at all. Like I'm the thing that I do is I typically am drawn to, I'll typically be drawn to like one or two people, and I'll just talk to them for most of the night. You know what I mean? It's like, who am I drawn to? Who am I gravitating toward? And then that will be the person that I'll start talking to. And that's about as, that's what'll happen. I'll talk to that person. I'll find out what they're doing, and it'll be because we're on the same wavelength, and that was the person I was meant to talk to.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
Here's the thing: you can try to work the room and go really shallow with a whole bunch of people and have no connection whatsoever. Or you do like you just said, and you go really deep with just a small handful of people, whatever. I mean, and there's not a number. You don't go into the room thinking like, I want to connect with this number. No, it's just, you just connect with who you're drawn to. And the thing is, you do it that way. Now you leave that room having made a much deeper connection with somebody that now you're going to follow up with them. Now you're going to start this relationship with them that will then lead to things and lead to you meeting more people than you could have ever done trying to work the room.
Yeah, exactly. And there might not be any perceived opportunity with that particular person.
That's right.
But suddenly you've got somebody else out there that knows who you are, that has experienced you as somebody who listens and is interested and is willing to allow them to be seen, heard, and understood. And that's when there's another advocate out there talking about you in positive ways in different circles. And that's pretty much how it all kind of happens. That's what, the last time we caught up, we talked about that phenomenon, where suddenly you get referred to somebody and you say, oh, so what was it that made you decide to give us a call? Oh, Keith Bruce told me to give you a call. Ah, right.
I don't know who Keith is.
I don't know who Keith is, but I must send him a Christmas card. So I love that. I think that's a fantastic way for us to finish tonight's conversation, is because we talk about relationships. How do relationships start? They start in networking type settings. So I think that's a perfect way for us to complete our discussion this evening, Kevin. So, mate, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on. And mate, if people want to find out, I know you've got a couple of masterminds and you've got some other resources. Where would they, if they were looking for you, where would they find you?
You know what? You can hit me up on Facebook or on LinkedIn. I'm not like overly active on LinkedIn. I'm way more active on Facebook, but hit me up either place. I think I'm trying to I think it's Kevin the Connector on Facebook, and and just hit me up there. Let me know that you heard the interview with John and stuff.
Yeah.
And that way it'll trigger me and stuff. So yeah, let me know that.
And then of course there's the $1 Million Relationship podcast. So they can listen to our other conversation on there.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Good stuff. Awesome. Well, thanks so much again, Kevin. I very much appreciate that. And mate, I will no doubt chat to you very shortly.
Awesome. My pleasure, John.
You've been listening to Master Dealmaker Secrets with John Blake. Subscribe to get more in-depth strategies and maximize your sales process with new episodes every other week. And double your inquiry to sale conversion with the lead flow you already have. Go to johnblakeaudio.com for his exclusive, free, no fluff audio training and companion PDF guide.